one of the biggest state budget beneficiary, Ministry of Defense has been lately a focus, and especially when it comes to an effort to have a foreign debt as a ministry's source of budget. And in this segment, I would like to present you some data about budget allocations inside the Ministry of Defense. And the first one will be about the budget allocations for the ministries year by year. So let's check the graphic. Through the graphic, we can see the budget allocations for the Ministry of Defense as a year by year. In 2015, we can see the number reach 101.3 trillion rupiah, but in 2016, it got decreased by 98.08 trillion rupiah. But in 2017, it increased by 117.2 trillion rupiah. We can see the trend in here is really fluctuative and really dynamic as well, because in 2018, we can see that the data is decreased by 106.7 trillion rupiah. Meanwhile, to 2020, jumped into that year, it reached 127.3 trillion rupiah. And international relations experts believe that Indonesia's move to beef up its security by setting aside more money for defense, in the state budget, is essentially based on its needs to improve the defense capabilities and security systems in order to deter any potential aggressor. Muradi, as a defense and a military analyst at the Pajajaran University, said that beefing up security in its territory, Indonesia, is sending a warning to other countries that may possibly be planning acts of aggressions against it. And according to Muradi, Indonesia records some 200 violations into its airspace per year. And there is a list of ministries that body experiencing an increase in terms of budget allocations. And who are they? So let's check the data. Through the data, we can see the ministries with the biggest budget allocations in a trillion rupiah, of course. First of all, we can see the dominant one is the Ministry of Defense with 127.3 trillion rupiah budget allocations. And the second place, we got the Ministry of Housing and Public Works with the 120.2 trillion rupiah budget allocations. And the third one is Indonesian Police by 90.3 budget allocations in trillion rupiah, of course. And every ministry received a budget increase except for the Ministry of Health, which saw a reduction of 28 million US dollar to around 4 billion US dollar. And the Defense Ministry and National Police received the largest budget increase. And the Defense Ministry's budget grew by 20% to 9.2 billion US dollar, while the budget for the National Police increased by 11% to 7.3 billion US dollar. And how about the biggest budget allocations inside the Ministry of Defense? So let's see the next data. This one is the biggest budget allocations inside the Ministry of Defense. We have 4 categories in here. For the foremost is the Management and Operational of Land Dimensions Program that costs 47.8 trillion rupiah. And in the second positions, we got the enhancement of ministry apparatus facility that becomes a government concern about this by 15 trillion rupiah. And then the next one is Management and Operational of Water Dimensions Program, which is the naval situations in here. It's 13 trillion rupiah budget allocations. And the fourth one is the Management and Operational of Air Dimensions Program that costs 7.8 trillion rupiah. And to avoid any misinterpretations by its neighborhoods, foreign policy experts also say that Indonesia would have to outline the reasons behind its plan to increase the defense spending. Increasing the military budget could make other countries worry if it's not explained in a very clear and diplomatic way. It could be dangerous. And therefore, Indonesia must be able to justify clearly on its white paper on the defense and its reason for the need of increasing the spending. And how about the source of the Ministry of Defense budget? So let's check the data. So here it is, the source of Ministry of Defense budget. In here we have 5 categories, and as we see on the pie chart, state budgets becomes the dominant one by the 87% of it. And the next one we can see the foreign debt, Into the pie chart, they have like 7% of the budget allocations, while the rest for domestic loan, non-tax state revenue, and public services agency, it costs like 2%. And even though being criticized by many parties, according to DAP and as the source of military expenditure, Hikmahanto Juwana, as the international relations experts from the University of Indonesia, said that the increase in defense spending is needed to protect the country from illegal actions by private groups, to be a peace broker that is any dispute occurring in the region, and also to boost Indonesia's participations in United Nations peacekeeping efforts. And Indonesia also requires adequate weapons system to protect its territory, as it has the second largest coastline in the world, which eventually is in line with Jokowi's agenda to be global maritime fulcrum. And Muradi, as a defense and military analyst at the Pajajaran University, said that further point out that increase in defense spending was also needed to improve the welfare of the personnel of the country's armed forces, aside from buying more weaponry. And seems like Indonesia is not the only country that allocates huge funds for its defense. So which countries has with the biggest defense expenditure? So let's check the data. We can see the countries with the biggest defense expenses in 2019. Of course, it is in $1 billion. And the first one we can see the USA with 3,793.8 billion US dollar budget allocations. We can see that the Department of Defense of United States has a really big budget on that. And the second one goes to China with 195 billion US dollar budget allocations for defense expenses. And United Emirates Arab for 67.9 billion US dollar. And next India for 66.5 billion US dollar. And we got France with 63.8 billion US dollar. And Russia for 61.4 billion US dollar. The United States spends far more than its military than any other countries in the world. And in fact, the accumulated defense spending budget of 6 other high-budget countries still does not equate the military spending allowance for the United States. And according to NATO's official figures, the U.S. spends only 3% of its GDP on defense, nearly twice the amount of spent on defense by other NATO countries combined. And hopefully, the increase of budget allocations on defense expenditure will give significant impact on Indonesia's sovereignty. And stay tuned because we will be right back.